let's build an MVP, show product market fit, show that this service is wanted and desired by our clients. And then we can basically innovate from an iterative standpoint, right? And just continue to build on top of that, right? So keeping things simple as you think about innovation is, I think, paramount as a learning for me through that journey.
Not everyone makes the news, but behind every growth-driving experience, product, and transformation are experts who shape the outcome. Welcome to Behind the Growth, a podcast for digital leaders and those aspiring to become one. Each episode features a candid conversation with a remarkable individual. Join us as we focus on their struggles, wins, and lessons learned you won't find anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to Behind the Growth. I'm your host, Mudassar Malik. And today we're celebrating Jimmy Dinh, Managing Director ESG at Simplii Financials. Jimmy, really excited to have you join us today.
Hey, Mudassar. Good morning. Excited to be here and excited for the conversation. Should be fun.
Excellent. Jimmy, I want to jump straight to something. And I was thinking that you're an innovator, you're a builder, disruptor of businesses. But how did this journey start?
Yeah, I think the journey started for me really just thinking about how we can use technology, how I can use technology and leverage technology to create new markets, create new products that were really interesting for clients, for people, for myself actually, right? So, it started way back when. So I'm a computer engineer, did engineering, in university for my undergraduate degree. And really, it was really, back then when I was in school, it was all about, the .com boom, right? So I went to school, I went to university during that whole phase, all these brand new internet companies coming out of Silicon Valley, and that really captured me. I was really more interested in thinking about startups, VCs in the computer lab when I was in school, and as interested as basically doing a project, learning how to code, learning how to basically design semiconductors, but equally fascinated about the business of technology. That's where I kind of thought about this. And, during school, did a few internships in Silicon Valley as well. So saw the entrepreneurial spirit around building, disrupting, creating new things for people and for clients and for partners.
Wow. Well, that's such a fantastic opportunity, and I think that's what inspired you, and I don't think you've looked back.
Yeah, I think, I think my career has taken many different steps. If you look at me today and you look at kind of where I am today, I work for, the wholesale investment bank of a large Canadian bank, CIBC. And if you kind of look back 20, 25 years ago, if I had thought myself as being a banker, the obvious answer to that question would be no, right? But I think, innovation and disruption and building services and products for, markets and for these industries, it takes you into different directions. And there are certain areas that, sometimes you could look at and say, hey, there's a ton of opportunity there, right? There's a ton of opportunity to basically create new things, to innovate. And usually they're in more conservative, more regulated industries, right? So, obviously financial services being one of them. Healthcare is another industry vertical, I think, today. If you look at kind of innovation, disruption, you look at entrepreneurship, startups, there's a lot of things happening there as well. So it's usually where, again, you look at these industries and, not looking back, like I want to basically, for my career, for my growth, it was like, hey, how do I have the most impact? How do I disrupt? How do I innovate in the best ways? And like sometimes you need to go into areas and where there are those opportunities, right?
Yeah, and I'm also thinking for many, innovation does come across as a buzzword, but I want to ask you, in your words, what does innovation mean, and what do you think is crucial? Especially, do you think it's crucial for the financial industry's growth? So, two parts of it. Let's decode what innovation means, and then let's go on to what does it mean for financial industry.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mudassar. I think innovation to me really is. If I had to think about that, to me, it's really, really thinking about how do we create new things that better the lives of people, our clients. How do we be very client-centric to improve or come up with new products and services that add a ton of value and that have never been done before. Also, innovation can mean to me, it's like, hey, take something that, we love and use and engage with today, and how do we think about, again, how does that transform? How does that basically evolve, right? How do we optimize things? So innovation can be, one, and people talk about this all the time. It could be incremental innovation, or it can be super disruptive innovation, I think. And there's room in that stratum or stratus for both types of innovation. But to me, really, innovation is thinking about, how do we do things or create things differently to improve or create something new. That's really one thing, right?
Love
for me.
That.
That's kind of my definition for innovation, right? And then two, back into financial services. Yeah, I think, obviously, again, like financial services is an area where if you think about kind of, how things worked or how we do things in financial services for, all parts of financial services, right? So whether it's consumer banking, whether it's banking for corporates and enterprises, whether it's kind of, investment and wholesale banking, it's an area where I would say, things have been done for a very long time the way they were done. Used to be very much not technology enabled, right? So to me, like looking at financial services overall, again, is super interesting because there's so much opportunities, right? And if you look at kind of a global mindset about things, there are markets, and I can basically, there are markets in the world where, financial services actually don't exist, right? If you look at kind of, again, we look at kind of markets, I'm Vietnamese, I believe you're from Pakistan,
correct?
South Asia, Africa. You look at in those markets, you use this term called, underbanked or unbanked, right? Where traditional finance didn't exist. So massive opportunity to innovate there. And you've seen some of that happening overall. In developed markets like in North America, in Canada, the US, in Europe, I think, again, back to basically thinking about how do we basically create services that are accessible, cost-effective, easy, and efficient for our customers. Those are just many opportunities that, again, are available in banking or financial services overall.
Yeah, like I completely agree. Like, and the opportunity is really, and it would depend on the regions, it could depend on the market, but overall, there's tremendous opportunity, and I think there's something that everybody wants to get behind. Building on it, let's also, I would love to pick your brains on what would you suggest as to others, like keep in mind some blind spots, something that you could warn them about, like they can go on the innovation and disrupting the traditional models or their innovation drives, but any blind spots that you would want to warn them about?
Yeah, I think for those, looking and working and thinking about innovation, I think, I'd always say one is just be careful about innovation as theater. I think, especially if, and looking at back of my experiences working in smaller companies and startups as well as very large corporates, like Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, sometimes, you can get caught up with theater masking as innovation, right? And I think that's a blind spot that we have to, and people think about wanting to work innovation, have to be really careful about. And I think, the way you think about that is to really innovate, you need to basically execute, get something to market, test and learn, and basically iterate back, right? And the commercialization or the go-to-market piece of innovation is really important because, again, whatever you're innovating on, when you think about innovation, you have to be able to manage and measure it somehow, right? And a blind spot I see all the time is, a lot of organizations, a lot of teams, innovation is slideware. Innovation is a lot of, show and narrative versus actually execution, right? And I think, one key part of that is really like experimentation and execution is a key part of the innovation equation, right? Versus just basically kind of thinking blue sky, strategy, ideas. I think ideas are great. New ideas are great. The value creation piece of innovation, where you actually kind of create innovation is actually in the execution, the go-to-market.
I love that. And it's so true. Like, what actually gets executed gets what experienced by the market. And that's really the key thing. Hitting the market, getting it out there. Just don't get locked in. Don't leave it in the boardroom. It should just not be for that. It's actually for implementation. And I think it just doesn't go with innovation only. I think execution is really a weak spot for many organizations or many teams. I think a lot of implementation failures happen in that side as well.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be fair. We all love insightful stories. And, so any notable ones that, come to mind where you created or launched a new product or, innovated something new or leading market significance for business value, tell us a success story.
Yeah, I think, great question, Mudassar. I think, with every success, there's always 10 failures that have happened, right? Success is not overnight. So I think, let me give you a story. I think that's pretty recent. It is a success overall. And really, I'll start with kind of, financial services, payments, and banking. That's the space I know really, really well. So if you look at kind of like, 10 years ago at CIBC in the bank, one of the things that we've always thought about that was a client irritant for us, that was an area that wasn't really a focus, but I think there's a ton of area for innovation, was really around like cross-border payments and cross-border commerce and money movement, right? And if you look at kind of, again, reversed back 10 years, if I wanted to send money to Pakistan or to India or to the Philippines or to Vietnam, and 10 years ago is we're still now in the era of, mobile devices, lots of great innovation, APIs, cloud services, burgeoning at that time. 10 years ago, we asked clients, right? So at CIBC, we asked clients, if you wanted to send money to India or to Pakistan, to Vietnam, you actually had to walk into a branch. You had to spend about 45 minutes going through a green screen, a mainframe green screen. It would cost you about $30 to $70. And you really didn't know when the money would arrive in Pakistan, in India, or Vietnam, or the Philippines, right? Wow. So that was, I think, a massive client opportunity and an area to innovate in, is in money movement and payments and cross-border commerce. And if you think about kind of how we thought about that, it was back to the customer, right? Back to thinking about how do we innovate for the customer? So one, how do we make things more convenient? Now, we have these phones, these mobile smartphones. We have lots of innovation happening in money movement overall globally. How do we make it easier, faster, more convenient, and a lot cheaper for clients to move their money back home? Remittance is a massive industry here in Canada, right? So we're a country of immigration, right? Of immigrants. Yeah. This year we brought in 1 million immigrants that came to Canada, right? So it's a country and a nation that's been built on immigration. So, we saw the remittance market, right? So moving money cross borders as a massive opportunity. It's a $30 billion market here in Canada with the third largest per capita of outbound money movement flows outside of Canada overall. So we looked at that and said, hey, you have to walk into a branch. You have to spend about 30 to 45 minutes in a branch to do this. It was complicated. It was costly. It was inconvenient. How do we change that, right? And again, the story was that, a lot of people within the walls of the bank were like, this is going to be hard, right? Like we need to partner with a Western Union or another provider. And I think, our view is basically looking at this and saying, hey, we have all these assets in the bank. And a big asset is, the foreign exchange business that we have, the foreign exchange trading infrastructure, and the people we have in the bank, within wholesale bank, within global markets. And what we did was like, hey, that's an asset. We've innovated there. We've grown the second largest FX foreign exchange business within the bank. How do we use that, and build new business and build this remittance product on top of that infrastructure and make it digital and make it super easy? And really the tenet was, we looked at it and said, what are the biggest 3 client irritants for this, for our clients? And it was about, it's inconvenient, it's expensive, and it's slow, right? It takes 5 to 7 days to get my money back home. So using those as first principles, we built a product and a solution called Global Money Transfer. It was launched 8 years ago. So, it was ourselves, myself as the head of the business and product. working with, a small team of call it, engineering, technology, and delivery folks in partnership with our retail FX traders in the bank, our retail banking partners within the bank to launch this product within CIBC. So in 2015, we launched Global Money Transfer. This was, a zero fee, completely digital on your phone, cross-border remittance service that was available 24/7. We basically gave real-time foreign exchange rates, so you knew exactly how much money was being sent home, and basically we delivered the funds to your loved ones, to your beneficiaries within 24 hours, if not real time.
Wow.
So we launched that product, that service 8 years ago. And I could tell you that, the way that we measure success is kind of in a couple areas. One is obviously, in innovation, adoption, right? So we saw extreme adoption of this product, right? Whereas before, our clients were going to other competitors, they were going across the street to other banks and FIs or the other FX payment dealers and players. We basically have them, even though they were clients, have them come back and use Global Money Transfer overall. So we saw a ton of great adoption. We saw a ton of great feedback from our clients as well on the product and service. So when you get feedback and you get a lot of engagement, it's always a great starting sign. So, you look at fast forward 8 years later, we have a business that, has, over 1 million clients using Global Money Transfer overall across the bank.
Wow.
We're doing, 8 years ago, in terms of remittance volume, it was less than $100 million overall of volume that was being sent through cross-border. We're now over $3 billion of volume annually on this, right? So, and we believe, again, amongst our peers and FIs, we have a market-leading service overall.
Phenomenal. What a great story. And I'm like, it's a tremendous success, but I'm sure like it went through a lot of lessons learned as well, right?
Yeah.
So any key thing that just comes to your mind right away?
Yeah, key things there was, I think, again, back to the story of innovation, keep it simple. I think throughout the life cycle of innovation, there are many ways to have complexity built into this or input or make complexity part of this journey.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, we want it to be very, very clear of, again, back to first principle, to simplify things. And that really was like, again, think about things in MVP, right? People love to talk about day one. As we went through this process of creating this new innovation, this new service, it was very, very apparent to me that this could have been like a lot bigger than what it was intended to be. We could have put a lot of features, do a lot of things to it, which would have basically made it a lot more complex, and could have basically puts a lot more risk into the project, into the program overall, right? So one is to think about, stick your guns, simplify things as you create new things.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, I would say.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge because it's so much easier to complicate things, but keeping things simple is tremendously hard. It's much harder than it looks like.
Yeah, totally. So the example on that one was I'll give you a very deep example. So when we were thinking about Global Money Transfer, we were like, folks, we went back, folks in the teams were like, hey, why don't we add more support for over 100 countries day one? And, after that was complexity, right? As you basically think about, delivering money and funds into a lot of countries, there are different features, different rails, different things you need to do. We decided, hey, day one, let's think about just the top 15, 20 countries that our clients want to send money to, and to really keep it simple. And let's basically try to get product market fit. Let's get to market quickly. Let's build an MVP, show product market fit, show that this service is wanted and desired by our clients. And then we can basically innovate from an iterative standpoint, right? And just continue to build on top of that, right? So keeping things simple as you think about innovation is, I think, paramount as a learning for me through that journey.
Fantastic takeaway. And I think you kind of also alluding to the crawl, walk, run, and I think that's also an important part of the process and the journey, right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, let's switch it up to something which is very, very timely. And I wanna know what's your take on AI and its potential impact in the financial industry. So I know that's a vague and a big, broad question, but whatever you can bring forward.
Oh wow! Yeah, so I think, again, Mudassar, great question on AI. I think, like my personal beliefs in AI is obviously as I think about inflection points, and then you go back to the question about innovation, how do I think about innovation? There are technology innovation. There are technology platforms that come to existence that basically change the trajectory of how you think about innovating on behalf of your client. In the 2000s, it was mobile and smartphones, right?
Yeah.
5 years later, it was cloud and APIs, right?
Yeah.
I think we're at an inflection point now, like sitting here in 2023, where AI is that next technology platform and that technology innovation that's come to the market that will allow, various industries, including financial services, to really take advantage of that technology platform, that technology innovation, to create new value for clients, for the ecosystem, for sure. So I'm super bullish about AI. Now, funny enough, I think, you look at kind of, at every stage of opportunity where these technologies come to bear in fruition, there's going to be a ton of hype. So I could tell you that, there's not 1 week that goes by, Mudassar, that I don't get a call from a brand new AI startup or a big tech firm saying what they're doing in AI. And that's great. I think there's a ton of activity, a ton of innovation here. I think the most interesting part of this is going to be, separating what is really going to be impactful and value driven for again, back to the client and think about the client to things that, again, or employees, because I think, or internal colleagues, because I think there's an opportunity there. But like right now, I think, there's so much going on. You have to basically be able to think about in AI, how to basically separate signal from noise. And then the enthusiasm is great. And you can do many things. I think I've seen every AI pitch so far I've heard about. The question is back to, understanding what your client needs are, what the client opportunity looks like, or customer opportunity looks like, and then walk back, create first principles again, and understand technology, understand how AI can help you with that, right? Funny enough, like within my role, we've been leveraging AI, analytics, and data for, I'd say, the past 4 to 5 years now for our businesses, for our cross-border money movement businesses, for sure. So with GBT, with large language models, with LLMs coming to the market, and really making it accessible for everyone to kind of leverage and a utility, I think there's just a lot more opportunities there. So I'm bullish. I'm always someone who sees the cup half full. I know there are a lot of folks who believe that, you hear the noise and the hysteria around AI being leveraged for nefarious or other reasons that are quite disheartening, to be honest with you. But I think, again, back to AI overall, I'm excited. I think, companies and firms and professionals looking to innovate, it's definitely a platform where there can be a great source of innovation and opportunity, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think these are such exciting times. And to your point, it's a major pivotal moment.
Yeah.
And, it's definitely a lot of noise, but it's also progressive.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff, going to be coming through. And it's not new. Like, to your point, like AI has been there for a while in different ways. It's just picked up as access to it. And, I think that's just really on the roll now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Jimmy, we're coming up on our time. And, I wanted to ask you, like, is there, looking back at your career and your journey, if you had an opportunity, what would you advise yourself, like your younger self? Like, is there something that you would want to tell yourself?
Yeah, I think, one, looking back, if I had to tell my younger self a couple things, I would say, sitting here now, definitely take more risks, right? Take more calculated risks in your career and do it in a way where you can learn a lot, right? You can basically have exposure and experience in different industries. You have the ability to innovate and create impact as much as possible. So definitely take more risks, because I think, again, when you're young, you're just starting out, like the ability to take a risk is and ingest risks and take that in terms of how you think about your career is really, really material, right? And you have the opportunity to do so. I think secondly, if I look back into, my younger self, bias yourself towards growth, learning, and working with, innovators, working with people who want to change the world, who want to basically disrupt, who want to create new things and new markets. Because, once you're in that ecosystem of working with and being in an environment like that, it's infectious, right? Like you definitely get to do that and basically get exposed to that and learn from that for sure. So I think again, I was lucky enough to basically have that experience with my younger self. When I was younger, it's when I was starting out in my career. I do think my advice back to my younger self is hey, like how do I do more of that, right? Like how do I basically again work with folks who one enjoy innovation, who enjoy disruption, who creating new things for the market, for themselves, for their customers.
Love that. Take more risk and find the right mentors that will keep you inspired.
Yeah, exactly. Inspiration is huge, right? So inspiration is huge. More mentors, working with people who are bright, intelligent, entrepreneurial, and again, they're growth minded, they're open minded, right? They're like, hey, like they question the world. They're curious. They're curious. They're questioning things and how things work, and so that's always something that I think for me was a big part of my growth overall.
Love it. Thank you so much. That's a great advice, Jimmy. I'm sure a lot of people want to connect with you. What do you recommend? LinkedIn?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. Definitely connect with LinkedIn. I'm proactive. I'm there. So LinkedIn's probably the best way to connect with me.
Excellent. Yeah. Jimmy, thank you for joining us today. And, it's an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Growth.
Mudassar, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Growth. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. This podcast is brought to you by Mobile Live, a team of digital experts specializing in designing experiences, building products, and scaling technology. For more episodes of Behind the Growth, please visit mobilelive.ca/podcast.